What is the difference between the soul and the higher self? Let's start with a bit of theory. Our body, to which the soul is attached, is very airy. If we look at each cell, we'll see that there are electrons, a nucleus, but most of the space itself is a vacuum. And if we stop the movement in these cells, we'll see that we are simply emptiness. Proportionally speaking, the volume is carefully attuned to this tiny little part of matter, which can be embodied. And this is a specific particle of the higher self that is deeply embedded into our human avatar, often located somewhere around the head and heart center. And it is, let us say, just like a tiny chip, which is truly our soul. The higher self, on the other hand, is an enormous concentrated being, often millions of times larger than this tiny chip, containing within itself a vast library of experiences. It holds the entire memory of your incarnations. Truly, it's like a super self revolving, and you only feel that you are a part of this deity, just from a single touch in the subtle space of the present with the higher self. It just blows your mind. You'll be overwhelmed by the power, might, scale, knowledge, and potential that you possess.
Indeed, this girl, what she describes is the difference between the soul and the higher self. That's how she sees it.
Look, well, here we run into terminology again. The most common question I get from the guys at school, in the comments everywhere, is, what's the difference between spirit, soul, and higher self? When I tell them something, they start arguing with me at first. Then someone else joins in and they start arguing with each other. Again, modern esotericism lacks orderliness. That is, in science, in physics, at least they somehow discussed and agreed on what to call things. This is called this, and that is called that. In esotericism, each school is so isolated from the others that they think they're the smartest, the most important, and that they know for sure. There is the physical body and there is the etheric body, which can be seen. Right here, yes, it's kind of blue here and usually yellow here. You can actually see it with your eyes. There are astral bodies, and then there's the so-called aura, this huge cocoon, which is also multidimensional and multicolored. And there is the mental body, sort of the body of the mind. It's actually easier to sense than to see. This is the mortal body, and there is also the immortal one. Mortal bodies can still be seen, but the immortal ones, they permeate all of reality, from, let's say, the closest physical layer all the way up to the absolute. There again, it's easier to sense them than to see them. It's like, I describe it as a kind of ocean that you dive deeper and deeper into. And then debates begin. Some say it's the soul, that this is one part of the ocean, while others say the spirit is another part. Some say the higher self is only the very top and everything else is not the higher self. For example, I, or the spirit, or the soul, I have one very powerful practice. It really goes deep. It actually perceives the soul as the very top, the highest element. That's what it calls it, specifically using this term. The immortal part that enters a person's body, she described it very accurately, almost as if it flows directly through the head. Well, yes, more likely, more like through this spot. This area right here, yes, and if you finally reach that much higher level, does that mean you kind of touch this divine transcendence? Yes, either through various forms of reflection or through other paths, which I've been talking about for years at the school, on the level of the body. If you pay attention to the body, you really feel either a vibration here or a vibration elsewhere. Ideally, of course, it would be here and here and here, but so you kind of, well, as she describes it, chips, right? So that both of these chips are working.
Is that right? We're discussing the soul, what she calls this?
Term, what she calls
The soul. I
can confirm from the perspective of a practitioner that there is immense multidimensionality there, immense, with enormous potential. That is absolutely true. Only a small part of this vast potential descends here. Accordingly, here and here as well. That's correct. That's exactly right, in terms of the substance.
So the higher self is truly a global presence, something far more vast than the soul.
Yes, using these terms.
What is the key difference between the soul and the higher self, if we use these specific terms for the concepts?
Like a ray of light. It's like this. The sun, the higher self is the sun, and the soul is like a ray that descends downward. And the ray on the one hand is a part of the higher self, but it is not the entirety of the higher self. Self, it's a broader story, yes. And the ray is, well, a kind of emanation of the higher self that descends like this. I see colds among my kids. Right now, there are 1,500 people at the school. That's really a lot. Seriously, those who come and really study intensively every day, very many people come in through this and very few come in through that. This is a kind of The projection of the spirit that is felt here is much stronger in people who are deeply grounded. Those who work very closely with this material world, they really reach the higher realms through this specific part. The guys who are out there in this vast multidimensionality, somewhat spaced out, you can even tell just by their appearance, they experience an exit right here. And they ask, do you feel this exit more at the level of the body here? Or perhaps more over here? He says, more here? And is the heart working? No. But with those first guys, it's the opposite. The heart is really working, really going strong. They even have tears streaming down. But not upwards. So ideally, of course, you want to combine this and this. That is, so that both are working.
And what exactly can this give? I mean, if you combine them?
The depth of the practice. Plus, you need to see what gets in the way. Because the guys who, for example, only go through the top, even their energy, it's a bit cold. You can really feel it coming from them. Cosmic energy, they're very transcendent, but there's not much human warmth in them. You can really see it. So they need to work on opening up, so to speak, their heart.
So, to put it very simply, we actually still enter the higher self by way of the soul.
Yes, to put it briefly, that's right. And if, on the contrary, a person, for example, has a lot of energy here but absolutely none here, then they need to develop their connection with the transcendent. There are actually specific techniques and practices for what to do in that case. Because only the combination of these two things, and this one, in my experience, is what really leads to a truly full-scale breakthrough. It's like you rise above. For example, I wrote the series Essence, the essence of everything. That's really my, how should I put it? I don't even know what to call it. My deepest series, the one I spent a huge amount of time on. I approached it from both sides at the same time. If I hadn't done both at once, I wouldn't have achieved what I did there.
Interesting. I think everyone feels that way now. All right, but if we dive in, say, into our human body at the atomic level, so really deep, there are actually a lot of studies that have basically proven that if you zoom in as much as possible, if you magnify everything, there is a huge emptiness between the cells, between the atoms. So where then is the soul located in this emptiness? So what does this actually look like on the subtle plane? I mean, we as humans, our soul and our higher self?
When I was on my journey, specifically in the cycle from the essence to the absolute, what was my goal there? I wanted to reach steadily one careful step at a time, climbing every inch of the way, all the way to the very top, so to speak. I made it. Honestly, after that, I slept for 18 hours, but I made it. When you try to go beyond the absolute, it kind of throws you back all the way down to the level of quarks. It throws you back into the void. It's like a snake biting its own tail. That's what this is about infinity. Only after that did I understand why the symbol of the snake biting itself, or the figure 8, is infinity, because it loops back onto itself. When you go beyond the absolute, it brings you right back down to the most cellular atomic level. And that's why, even in this emptiness between quarks, if you can call it that, even it is filled with the energy of the primordial creator, the original God, which is what we all are. It's no coincidence that in Hinduism they say Atman is identical to Brahman. That is to say, our highest emanation, the Atman, so to speak, the upper part of the so-called higher self, is identical to this vast infinity and this boundlessness. And in this way, the macrocosm is directly connected to the microcosm. As above, so below, as below, so above. Everything is one, and one is everything. That's my Chinese friend's favorite phrase. I didn't fully understand it until I reached it through practice. It really comes from there. It literally pours down right here, pours down into this emptiness. And in these vast silent spaces of interatomic emptiness, it is filled completely with the radiant energy of the primordial creator, the original primordial source of all existence. So, to put it very simply, yes, every single part of our perceived emptiness is made up of this eternal, unified and infinite essence, which is simply manifested at a multitude of different vibrational levels in various different emanations. So, in short, yes, we are all deeply imbued with the divine energy of our own eternal transcendence. But to make it easier for the mind to understand, we can explain it like this. We are all, as it were, filled with spirit, or rather, not even spirit, okay, filled. According to her terminology, with soul, which is completely dissolved everywhere within us. In some places it just feels a bit more concentrated, because these are, so to speak, the gateways into this illusion in which we live. So the gateways of entry are kind of here and here, but in essence we are all one. And everything is one, and everything is everything.
All right. Returning to the topic of this video, the girl also talks about the higher self. It has a specific phrase, a thesis, the library of experiences. That is, every single bit of our accumulated experience from all reincarnations is carefully stored away in that place. Do you agree with that?
Yes, of course, of course. So again, I already have a separate series on this topic. It's called, well, I have a text on almost any topic. It's called How I Lived After Death. First of all, I finally clearly saw my past lives through my higher self. I gathered them into a sort of pile. It's similar to compiling a book. It's like, one life is just a chapter, so to speak. There are just a few lines on a single page. But here, it's as if you see the whole book completely in its entirety. You see where you came from, what you've arrived at, and where you're heading in the future. It's precisely through the higher self that you can see your real past lives, again, without the mind hallucinating. Because the mind still introduces its own distortions. If you disidentify with the personality, disidentify with the mind, go there into transcendence. Through transcendence, you can see more purely simply your past lives. Well, yes, it's just a piggy bank of experience, yes. That is, she is a practitioner, it is obvious. That is, she is a practitioner, she really says everything to the point.
Now, if we touch, for example, on the concept of the soul's experience, that is, every soul has a certain experience that has been formed over this number of incarnations. So here we have, you could say, young souls, more mature souls, and everything depends on experience, meaning on what they have gone through. Is that right?
Let's say there is the absolute. To simplify this so everyone understands, there is the absolute. Everything is one and one is everything. In some ways, in some traditions, it is called the absolute. In other traditions, it is equated with Shiva. That's not the point. The point is that in some traditions, it is equated with Brahman, depending again on the perspective. It is indivisible, it is eternal, it is infinite. In Hinduism, they say that it can only be described in terms of what it is not. That's true. When I saw it, it really could only be described in terms of what it is not. That is, it is indivisible, it is impermanent, it is both static and not static at the same time. In other words, it encompasses everything. But deep below that surface, it is very much like a complex fractal. It starts to break down into many different elements, into various conditional levels and distinct conditional layers. And there is a specific level, roughly speaking, of the original creator of the entire universe and another level of a significantly higher or lower order. And at every level, that is us. When I reached the level of the creator of everything, I saw myself. When I reached the level of the absolute, I also saw myself in it, in the absolute. This is exactly the essence of the phrase that all is one and one is all. And the fact that Atman is identical to Brahman, that is your own highest emanation, is essentially this very eternal absolute. But here in our world, as if in a certain illusion of separateness. That's why Hindus say that everything is an illusion, that everything is Maya, both in this world and in the afterlife. Here there is a certain illusion of separateness, a certain illusion of time. There time no longer exists. So no matter how many times you go there, to those high transcendental states, there is no time, there is no space, there is nothing at all.
All right, but what if we take a look specifically at this level?
At this specific level, the concept of age exists because as soon as time and space appear, there is a past life and there is a next life. That is, there are, let's say, 10 lives before this one and 20 lives after this one. As soon as distance, time, and age appear, we can immediately talk about it. About the age of the spirit. Well, meaning that there are more mature souls and less mature ones. But this is only, roughly speaking, at a certain level.
For example, if you just consider two individuals, one with an experienced soul and one with a very young soul, what is their main difference likely to be, specifically in terms of our world?
Listen, we even created an entire technique for this, determining the age of the spirit down to the year. We equated it to a kind of conditional cycle. We took the cycle of incarnation from 0 to whatever it may be and equated it to 80 human years. You can divide this distance, this cycle, into as many parts as you want. Into 1,000 pieces if you like, or into 100%, you can measure it in percentages or in pieces. We decided to measure it in human years, conditionally, because that's immediately clear. For example, your higher self, your spirit, is conditionally 15 years old, while you are, say, 22 years old. And it immediately becomes clear to us what we're talking about. That is, if it's 15, then the soul is kind of a teenager. If it's 22, well, you've already passed 18, so it's like a maturing spirit, right? What did we understand? We understood. This was quite a large study. After my school, I have what's called post-course training. There are a number of techniques there, including this technique for determining the age of the spirit. As of today, we have a percentage of age matches of the spirit. Here's how we do it in the group. We review, then share our experiences. About 80%. That's actually a very good, really high indicator already. What did we understand first? First of all, this planet is a planet of teenagers. Here, the average age is 16 to 17 years old. If you take the average, so to speak, it's 16 to 17. Specifically, if we use the system from 0 to 80, it's about 16 to 17. In percentage terms, that would be roughly 20% of the cycle. Esoteric practitioners are on average from 19 to 25. It's just like magic. We analyzed literally hundreds of photos of people involved in esotericism. They all fit within this range from 19 to 24 or 25, with very rare outliers going higher. So
The patterns are clear.
really clear patterns, absolutely distinct, yes. Moreover, in some countries, in more developed countries, more experienced souls come. In less developed ones, let's say, in very poor countries, less experienced souls come. Well, again, that's obvious because, let's say, for more experienced souls, it's not very interesting anymore to play, roughly speaking, at a dump, a landfill, a garbage heap. It's just that they have their own goals. For example, they want to realize themselves in science. But if in this country the most science can offer is being a veterinarian, that's the maximum it can provide. Well, you just can't really realize yourself in this field here. Politicians, by the way, are on average between 10 and 16 years old. There are practically none above that. Maybe souls are simply no longer interested. Again, with rare exceptions. There are just a few presidents, 2 we found. Among the major ones who are, I think, 20 or 23 years old, which is extremely rare in politics. For the most part, they are all between the ages of 10 and 15 years old, while the major business figures tend to be a bit older, ranging roughly from 12 to 18. We analyzed an extensive collection of photos and carefully compiled a vast amount of written documentation on this specific topic. And
But what if, for example, you take some lonely monk or hermit?
you have to look. Usually, if it's a monk or a hermit, it's already all about spirituality. That's how it turns out, somewhere between 19 and 25. I suppose, again, since he's a monk or a hermit, he's within the egregor, and most likely he doesn't go beyond 25. Those guys who go beyond 25 are usually completely outside of religion. The oldest spirit we saw was 38, older than 38 on this planet, per the 0.8 system, roughly speaking. 45% of the cycle just isn't there, because everyone older already goes to other worlds or planets. They aren't interested in being here.
There's such a concept as a person without a soul. What do you think? Is that even possible in general? And maybe only the higher self remains, the I without, essentially.
I see. We haven't seen that. We've never seen it once. We checked on purpose. We were curious. Again, I've written a bunch of texts on this topic about biorobots. Those really spread around the internet. Like, yeah, we found a person without a soul. There are people who are just very much asleep. Well, I mean, they are completely fixated in their mind, entirely in their mind. They have nothing else. They don't have any of these transcendent experiences at all, this kind of perception. If you analyze a person, again, we have a specific technique for this. It's called determining spirituality from a photograph. You open a photo of someone on your phone, turn it over to the backside, and ideally you take off the case so it doesn't get in the way, and then you look for the spark from the backside. Then again, you exchange opinions. By the way, it's a pretty easy technique. Here, probably the results match about 95% of the time. It's really very easy. That is the spark. This spark is present in everyone. We haven't seen a single person in whom it wasn't at least smoldering a little bit. But often it's buried under so many blocks, under so many granite walls. So it looks like a small flickering flame from the outside that's just carefully tucked away behind these specific types of protective walls. And deep inside, it is constantly trying to smolder somehow. If it ever goes out, then that individual will surely pass away. That is exactly why we have never seen a living person who did not possess that internal spark. Sometimes the spark is so well hidden that you really have to look for it, yes, under a pile of beliefs, fears, blocks, convictions, but for it to be completely absent, there's no such thing.
Now, I have one last question, although in reality I have so many more. Does the soul's experience influence our physical life here? Or rather, how does it influence it? If, for example, someone has certain innate talents, like they master something virtuously, or sing beautifully, or have some abilities that, say, show up early in childhood, I don't know, they immediately stand out in something, while others don't? That depends on experience, to connect it with.
Wraith?
Age experience correlate?
No, because again, the average age of singers, of showmen, according to our estimates, it also starts somewhere around 16 and goes up to about 20 with rare exceptions. From there, the average age, for example, of a singer is usually lower than that of a person who is interested in esotericism or more spiritual knowledge.
So these, let's say, extraordinary and collective achievements on our physical plane of existence, they really do not possess in...
The average age, as I said, is 16 to 18 years old across the planet. So rather, it is more likely that an experienced spirit fits into this category. A more experienced one can be identified by a certain wisdom. That is, right from birth, he is wise, he is very thoughtful. Yes, from early childhood, he is already very deep.
Well, it's more about depth because there's a fine line here as well. There's a difference between being a deep person and being smart, because you can be smart, like, I don't know, getting top grades at school.
But this person is not necessarily intellectual. In fact, on the intellectual level, he might actually be quite ordinary. That is, if you don't take into account specific techniques or certain practices that can clearly determine things, again, we usually determine up to a year. You can even narrow it down to the month, but that's really digging deep. As I call it, that's splitting hairs, so there's not much point in it.
Daniel, thank you for your answers. Friends, be sure to write your questions, share your impressions, and leave your comments. We see and read everything. Your feedback is truly important to us. You will also find all the links in the description below this video.
My dear friends, for 10 years now, I've been teaching a course on the higher self for a Russian-speaking audience. During this time, about 4,000 to 4,500 people have passed through my school. I've been working on this topic for 20 years. Today, my school is one of the largest and most famous specialized schools for connecting with the higher self in the Russian-speaking world. And then I suddenly realized that it is finally time to reach out to the masses, so to speak. Yes, to the much wider world and to the incredibly vast expanse of the entire global internet. All the professional skills I have carefully developed, all the dedicated practices I have refined, and all the quick entries, thorough checks, and rigorous exams I have built over the last 10 years are now being brought to a truly global level. I now invite you to join a brand new, specially discounted group for the comprehensive Return to the True Self course, now available in English for students everywhere. 6 months of work on stopping the internal dialogue, working with blocks, and focusing on actually accessing the higher self. Answering both simple and complex questions regarding purpose, contact with God, and with the planet. Answering basically any questions on any topic, including work, relationships, and anything at all. Manifesting desires through the higher self, viewing past lives through the higher self, and everything that didn't fit into the first 5 months in a separate 6th one. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to join the alumni club, as well as the chance to continue your studies at the 2nd level of the school. The price for the discounted groups is discounted. You can find all the information about this below at the link under this video.